Chief Robin Henderson.
That's right. Let's listen in.
No, we are in the early stages of the investigation, and the details are subject to change. The Austin Police Department is investigating an officer-involved shooting that occurred at 9308 Bernoulli Drive. At 2:49 a.m., 911 Communications received a call requesting help at that same location where a caller was screaming for help. The caller provided more details and said somebody was stabbing her. At approximately 2:57 a.m., the first officers arrived on scene wearing Austin Police Department uniforms and responding in a patrol capacity to a shooting, stabbing, hotshot call. The officers began to gather additional information, including the suspect's location. Officers were also notified that there were 2 other people injured inside the residence with the suspect. Prior to officers' arrival, a third victim of the suspect was able to escape from the residence and was located by officers and Austin Travis County EMS in the neighborhood. She said the suspect still had a knife, and she was subsequently transported at 3:03 a.m. by Travis County EMS to a local hospital for the injury she had sustained. Based on that information provided to the officers, at approximately 3 a.m., officers made emergency forced entry into the residence to rescue the 2 victims. Before officers made entry, they announced themselves and identified themselves as Austin police officers. At 3:01 a.m., as the officers entered, they were fired upon by the suspect. The officers then backed out of the residence and did not return fire at that time. At 3:06 a.m., because the suspect was armed and barricaded inside a residence and had 2 hostages, SWAT was called out to the scene. At approximately 4:11 a.m., SWAT officers arrived on scene and forced entry into the residence a second time to rescue the victims. As SWAT officers entered, the suspect immediately fired his gun at the officers, and the SWAT officers returned fire. At approximately 4:15 a.m., during the exchange of gunfire, information was provided over the radio that 2 officers were shot. The 2 officers were transported to a local area hospital by Austin Travis County EMS. The suspect on scene succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced deceased. Despite the tremendous efforts of our officers, our EMS TAC medics, our Austin Fire Department, and the staff at the local hospital, one of our officers succumbed to his injuries. The second officer is in stable condition. 2 apparent victims of the suspect were located inside of the residence with fatal injuries and were pronounced deceased on scene. This officer-involved shooting was captured on body-worn camera. Multiple APD officers discharged their department-approved firearms. The officers will not be identified at this time. APD will conduct 2 concurrent investigations into this incident. A criminal investigation conducted by the APD Special Investigations Unit in conjunction with the Travis County District Attorney's Office, and an administrative investigation conducted by the APD Internal Affairs Unit with oversight from the Office of Police Oversight. I'd like to thank Travis County TAC medics and Travis County EMS. Our officers on scene, Austin Fire, and the medical staff that treated our officers and worked so hard to save our officer's life. It's very much appreciated. I'd also like to highlight the incredible bravery displayed by our officers day in and day out. I could not be more proud of their heroic actions. Thank you.
All right, you're listening live to a very somber, and rightfully so, Interim Police Chief Robin Henderson detailing. There were a lot of details about what transpired overnight. If we can just kind of go from the very beginning, she said just before 2:50, around 2:49, there was a 911 call, Tony. Someone had called 911 saying, I need help, someone is stabbing.
According to Chief Henderson, the person calling 911 was screaming into the phone.
So just before 3, officers arrived, APD arrived, and basically what happened was that the officers that were injured were in the house, but it appears that not at one point, but at 2 different points, officers were trying to go into the house because they were under the impression, and rightfully so, there were 2 people who were in danger in the house at that time, right? So they were trying to go, kind of a rescue situation.
It was a rescue situation, according to her, and she also described that a 3rd person was able to leave the home, escape the home, and was able to convey to law enforcement the seriousness of this situation.
And that 3rd person was injured that person was stabbed. So that person, obviously EMS was taking care of them, but that person, yes, you're right, the 3rd person managed to escape. We were told the suspect had a knife. Obviously the suspect also had a gun. There was a forced entry at 3 a.m. to rescue those 2 victims that were in there. Officers reacted very bravely, and they did their part to try to go in and save those individuals. But once they heard shots fired, that's when they kind of retreated.
Yes. And then at that point, this became a full-scale SWAT mobilization. And Yvonne, that's not uncommon. One of the things, and I've reported on this topic before, is when officers are confronted with a situation like this where there may be hostages, whether or not the officers, the patrol officers who may not have the same equipment, who typically don't have the same equipment as a SWAT team, whether or not they should make immediate entry or whether or not they should wait for a SWAT team. It seems like what happened in this case is that the patrol officers deemed this such an emergency situation that they tried to make some entry into the home, took fire and heard fire, as you mentioned, and then called a SWAT team. And that's pretty standard for something like this in a situation like this.
Yes, it's a very tumultuous situation. Now, 311 was at, again, forced entry the 2nd time with SWAT. The suspect was shooting at them. There was an exchange of gunfire. Again, around 4:15 is when both of those officers, the SWAT officer and the other officer, were transported. One died, and the other one sustained some injuries. And that other officer, APD officer, in stable condition.
In stable condition. And one of the things that the chief clarified that we've been wondering about this morning is whether or not the 2 people dead inside the house included the shooter or not. The shooter is dead, apparently, although the shooter is dead, although it's unclear whether or not police shot and killed him or whether or not this was self-inflicted in some way. We know, according to the chief, that multiple officers did open fire as this all unfolded. But again, just a very dynamic situation.
And speaking of clarity, Robin Henderson did mention that it was all captured on body camera. So of course, I don't even know how long, but it'll be some time, given that this is a big investigation, that we can get our hands on that body cam footage, if that, right? But officers will be able to hopefully, again, identify at this time. Right now, they can't identify who that suspect is. Obviously, also the SWAT officer who passed away. I mean, they're kind of not letting us know at this point, but we did get a lot of details.
Right.
I mean, down to the minute on
a timeline, an exact timeline. But one of the things too, in addition to the facts that the chief presented to us as she knows them at this time. I think it was also just so striking, Yvonne, the emotion that was coming through. I mean, even at the very start, it seemed as though she was almost overcome by emotion and had trouble, difficulty even starting.
She had to stop herself, you can tell, and just kind of compose herself. And I mean, this is extremely difficult, a very difficult situation, one of their own. And she did want to say that she wanted to commend officers for their incredible bravery and during this, very daring act. And again, this was a rescue situation, something that just started off as a call, a very frantic call at that.
Exactly, screaming as she described that victim. And also in addition to all of the information that she provided as well, we know that the officer's family has been notified this morning. We do not have that officer's name who passed away, but again, just a somber time within the department and within our community.
And just as we wrap things up for now, again, we're going to have the very latest on air and online throughout the day, especially on KVUE.com. But this investigation involves the DA's office, involves criminal investigators. So this is going to take some time, and we're going to get more information as the days and weeks come about.
Exactly. And again, just to underscore that this is the first time in 11 years that an Austin police officer has lost his life as a result of a shooting, just underscoring how difficult this will be for the police department and for our community in the days to come.
And thank you so much for watching. Again, keep it here on air and online on KVUE.com as we continue to bring you more on this breaking news situation.
Coming up, a tiny all-American bird is giving us a little exercise.
So we just had one go in, but then it went out.